Coming in at 5, Audition. Audition is a 1999 Japanese horror film and based on the 1997 novel of the same name. The film centers on a widower, Shigaru, whose son suggests that he should find a new wife. He agrees and with a friend stages a phony audition to meet a potential new partner in life. After interviewing several women, he becomes interested in one, Asami, who responds well to him, although as they begin to date, her dark past begins to affect their relationship. For much of the movie's running time, Audition doesn't feel quite like a horror movie, but instead more like a romantic comedy. However, as things develop, the tone shifts drastically and becomes incredibly violent and intense. Now the film marks a pivotal moment in international horror, leading to the creation of movies such as The Grudge, High Tension, and even Martyrs, a lot of which were dismissed as torture, which some deem lowbrow. These films are sophisticated works of art and instead are an attempt to bring horror in line with 21st century issues. Honestly, if you haven't watched Audition, please do it, it's definitely worth your attention. Coming in at 4, The Orphanage. The Orphanage is a 2007 Spanish supernatural horror movie directed by J.A. Bayona. The plot centers on Laura, who returns to her childhood home, an orphanage. Laura plans to turn the house into a home for disabled children, but following an argument with Laura, her son Simon goes missing. The film is filled to the brim with unsettling scares, from lurking ghost children in the shadows to unrelenting noises stemming from inside the home. Now the film itself is set in a classic horror terrain, and to top it off, Guillermo del Toro is the executive producer, and the movie has his mark written all over it. However, the most terrifying scene of all takes place when Laura is forced to play the game that she and her friends played as children, but this time in the dark with some ghosts. 1, 2, 3, knock on the door. She stands facing a wall as numerous ghost children stand behind her, getting closer and closer. It is absolutely horrifying and is the best horror technique I've seen used in a very long time. She goes along with the game, eventually following clues and being led to the basement where she finds her missing child. However, I will leave it at that, but though I have spoiled some of this, I do not want to spoil the absolutely devastating twist that follows the discovery. What is so effective about this movie is simply its humanity. The humanity of what actually went bump in the night. Coming in at 3, Session 9. Session 9 is a 2001 psychological horror movie directed by Brad Anderson. The plot follows an asbestos abatement crew who begin to experience growing tensions while working in an abandoned mental asylum, which is paralleled by the gradual revelation of a former patient's disturbed past through recorded audio tapes of the patient's regression sessions. Now, what sets Session 9 apart from many other independent horror movies is its capability to sustain a level of unbroken tension. The movie is eerie throughout, with our characters getting sent on many independent missions, leaving them completely vulnerable inside the abandoned hospital. Now, Session 9 takes major cues from The Shining, at times even shamelessly ripping off some of the more terrifying elements, including Danvers, the hospital, essentially turning into the Overlook Hotel, and our protagonist Gordon becoming a Jack Torrance of sorts. However, the more horrifying moments come when the character Mike takes some audio files from a former patient and listens to them in the basement of the hospital. There he learns of a patient named Mary Hobbs who has multiple personality disorder. Now, although the tapes don't have a direct correlation to the rest of the story, if you try hard enough, the connection is there. The tapes depict the maddening decline of a former patient, which parallels what is happening to the gang in the abandoned hospital. The film drives you stir crazy, but in all the best ways, and depending on when and where you watch it, it will definitely keep you up at night. Coming in at 2, Martyrs. Martyrs is a 2008 horror movie written and directed by Pascal Laugier. The plot centers on 2 young women who were both victims of abuse, who then embark on a bloody quest for revenge, only to find themselves plunged into a living hell of depravity. The film was controversial upon its release, receiving polarizing reviews from critics. It was categorized as a new example of new era French horror films akin to Inside with regard to the level of violence it depicts. The general consensus went as follows: a real polarizing movie. This Gaelic torture is graphic, brutal, nasty, and gruesome, and not to everyone's taste, with Todd Brown going on to state, I quote, "The most divisive film to screen in Cannes this year." Now, where the movie differs from other torture movies such as Saw and Hostel is the simple fact that the movie is utterly despairing and nihilistic, and unlike the movies I mentioned, Martyrs doesn't glamorize the brutality and never once encourages viewers to relish or enjoy the bloodthirsty moments. Instead, we are made to suffer along with our characters, and instead of physical torture, it's just torturous to watch. It's not a movie one can easily return to, and if you get around to watching, which I suggest you should at least once, please bring a friend and maybe some wine, because this movie is absolutely savage and unrelenting. It's disgusting. And finally in at number 1, A Tale of Two Sisters. A Tale of Two Sisters is a 2003 South Korean psychological horror film written and directed by Kim Ji-woon. It was inspired by a Joseon Dynasty era folktale which has been adapted to film several times. Plot centers on a recently released patient from a mental institution who returns home with her sister only to face disturbing events between her stepmother and the ghosts haunting their home, all of which are connected to a dark past in the family's history. South Korea has been extremely reliable when it comes to horror movies, with them producing some of the most terrifying horrors of all time, including The Wailing and Train to Busan. Now, the movie is from the perspective of Soo-mi, who looks after her timid younger sister Soo-yeon. The pair hate their stepmother, who was once the nurse for their late mother. Now, any longtime horror fan or hawk-eyed viewer might be able to spot the twist coming a mile off. However, the first twist is only one part and another twist is quickly incoming, which turns the movie completely on its head. The film is superb in the way it distracts viewers with one obvious twist, only to blindside us with yet another. A twist that is so shocking you'll wish you hadn't watched the movie alone. Now, I'm not going to spoil the movie for you because it is genuinely fantastic and deserves your attention. However, just remember to grab a friend before you turn it on. Coming in at 5, Mandy. Mandy is a 2018 horror film directed by Panos Cosmatos and stars Nicolas Cage and Andrea Riseborough. The film itself takes place in the Pacific Northwest in 1983, where outsiders Red Miller and Mandy Bloom lead a loving and peaceful existence. When their pine-scented haven is savagely destroyed by a cult though, led by sadistic Jeremiah Sand, Red is catapulted into a phantasmagoric journey filled with bloody vengeance and laced with deadly fire. Now, this relatively simply structured revenge flick quickly erupts into a fantastic spectacle of violence and drug-fueled emotion. According to Rotten Tomatoes, the film currently holds a 91%, with the general consensus being Mandy's gonzo violence is fueled by a gripping performance by Nicolas Cage and anchored with palpable emotion conveyed between his volcanic outbursts. Reviewing the film after its world premiere at the Sundance Film Festival, Nick Allen of RogerEbert.com praised it, writing that for all of the endless feral performances that Cage has given in movies good, bad, and forgettable, Cosmatos' style-driven 80s-tastic passion for weird worlds and characters takes full advantage of Cage's greatness, and then some. Honestly, something that no one would have ever expected. A good Cage performance. We all remember the bees, right? Never forget the bees. Anyway, Mandy is honestly a movie that needs to be shown, specifically at Friday movie nights in October. It's a party movie, and one that will have you yelling at the screen along with a friend to enjoy the ride with. In at 4, The Collector. The Collector is a 2009 horror movie written by Marcus Dunstan and Patrick Melton, with it originally being shopped as a prequel to the Saw franchise, but the idea was quickly dismissed. The movie centers on a man desperate for money to pay off a debt, so he targets a wealthy family's home and plans to break in and steal a valuable gem. He soon learns though that he picked the wrong night to carry out his plans, because a masked madman has already gotten there first, imprisoned the family, and lined the mansion with deadly traps. I should preface this by saying this film truly messed with my head. I would go as far as to say it traumatized me for a long time, simply because I wasn't expecting the level of horror that it brought forth. It genuinely disturbed me and it paralyzed me with fear, but that could simply be because I watched it back to back with Session 9. That's my own fault. The film itself is yet another riff on the home invasion thriller, but it blurs the lines by coming in the form of a dueling felons topped with a host of creative death traps. Now, as much as it scared me, the movie was met with generally negative reviews from critics, with it receiving a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the general consensus reading, "Increasingly tedious displays of gore makes this torture on home invasion horror more pragmatic than provocative." On November 30th, 2012, a sequel was also released named The Collection. It was a dud. Don't recommend. In at 3, Lake Mungo. Lake Mungo is a 2008 Australian psychological horror movie written and directed by Joel Anderson. The film employs a mockumentary format, using actors in place of interviewees to tell the story of a family trying to come to terms with the drowning death of their daughter and the potentially supernatural events they experience after her death. Few films have managed to convey the grieving process better than Lake Mungo, a film that somehow failed to even receive distribution in the United Kingdom. This movie is incredibly underrated and is a suspenseful slow burn from beginning to end. Tension builds swiftly throughout as things begin to go bump in the night for the family dealing with their grief. It is a movie that manages to spend almost the entirety of its runtime building the chills until the freaky climax scares the shit out of you, makes you wish you never watched it in the first place. It also manages to leave you with more questions than answers, making it the perfect movie to watch with a friend. In its limited release, Lake Mungo was met with critical acclaim, with it earning a 94% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Very early on, before the movie was officially released, Variety named it an ambitious, restrained, and well-mounted mockumentary. In It Too, Funny Games. In It Too, Funny Games US. Funny Games is a 2007 horror movie written and directed by Michael Haneke, and a remake of his own 1997 film of the same name. The film is a shot-for-shot remake of the 97 film, albeit in English and set in the United States with different actors. The film centers on a couple whose idyllic lakeside vacation home becomes terrorized by Paul and Peter, a pair of deeply disturbed young men. When the fearful Anna is home alone, the two men drop by for a visit that quickly turns violent and terrifying. Husband George comes to her rescue, but Paul and Peter take the family hostage and subject them to nightmarish and humiliation. From time to time, Paul even talks to the film's audience, making us complicit in the horror unfolding on screen. The film is utterly disturbing, yet director Haneke states that the entire film was not intended to be a horror movie. He says he wanted to make a message about violence in the media by making an incredibly violent yet pointless movie. Upon its release, the film received mixed reviews from critics, with the movie holding a 51% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. The general consensus reads, "Though made with great skill, Funny Games is nevertheless a sadistic exercise in chastising the audience." However, others disagreed, with Todd Gilchrist calling the movie unrelenting and brilliant. Funny Games is a truly great film, an incisive artistic triumph that doubles as a remarkably thrilling and unique cinematic experience. And quite honestly, I couldn't agree more. And as previously mentioned, the horror doesn't lie in the grotesque nature of the movie, but it lies simply in ourselves and how we as an audience are made to feel complicit in the acts taking place on screen. We're all guilty. Finally, in at number 1, AntiChrist. AntiChrist is a 2009 English-language Danish experimental psychological horror film. That's a mouthful. Written and directed by Lars von Trier and starring Willem Dafoe and Charlotte Gainsbourg. The movie tells the story of a couple who, after the death of their child, retreat to a cabin in the woods where the man experiences strange visions and the woman manifests increasingly violent sexual behavior and sadomasochism. The film itself was written in 2006 while von Trier had been hospitalized due to a significant depressive episode, with the film largely being influenced by his own personal struggles with depression and anxiety. After he and she retreated to the cabin in the woods, things go from bad to worse for the couple, with the oppressive Dafoe becoming impotent and Gainsbourg going absolutely stir-crazy. It is perhaps one of the most disturbing movies I've ever seen, and audience members felt the same way, with most yelling at the screen and covering their eyes during the scenes. Two versions of the film were available at the Cannes Film Festival, nicknamed the Catholic and Protestant versions, where the former had some of the most explicit scenes removed, while the latter was uncut. However, the critical response was split between Denmark and the United States. In Denmark, the film quickly became successful with both critics and audience members, with it being labelled a grotesque masterpiece and receiving a perfect score of 6 out of 6. However, the film polarized critical opinion in the United States, with it holding a 53% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 stars out of 4, stating, "Von Trier, who has always been a provocateur, is driven to confront and shake his audience more than any other serious filmmaker. He will do this with sex, pain, boredom, theology, and bizarre stylistic experiments." The movie went on to win the award for Best Cinematographer at the 2009 European Film Awards, which it shared with Slumdog Millionaire. Not too shabby. In at 5, It Follows 2015. It Follows is a 2015 supernatural psychological horror film written and directed by David Robert Mitchell, and starring Micah Monroe, Kea Gilchrist, and Jake Weary, with the plot centering on a teenage girl named Jay who is pursued by a supernatural entity after a sexual encounter. Now, infection in horror movies is spread in numerous ways: a bite, a videotape, even a button from a jacket. However, It Follows takes a new spin on things and spreads infection when characters get it on. It Follows is set up like it shouldn't be scary, yet it is, with teenager Jay being plagued by ghosts that no one else can see. Ghosts that slowly and endlessly walk towards her until she passes it on. The movie isn't just scary, it is terrifying, with some of the most unnerving jump scares that will have you turning off the movie or grabbing onto a friend for help. The most effective scares comes from the relentlessness of the ghosts, who are completely dead-eyed with one goal: to pursue Jay and kill her unless she passes on the infection. Audition. The film itself has sparked numerous interpretations from film critics in regard to the source of it and the film's symbolism. Some have interpreted the film as a parable about HIV/AIDS, other sexually transmitted infections, and the social perceptions of thereof, the sexual revolution, and primal anxieties about intimacy. However, director David Robert Mitchell has stated, I quote, "I'm not personally that interested in where it comes from. To me, it's dream logic in the sense that they're in a nightmare, and when you're in a nightmare, there's no solving the nightmare, even if you tried to solve it. It Follows is a modern masterpiece that you definitely can't watch alone. It will also have you avoiding one-night stands." Sorry. Coming in at 4, Rec 2007. Rec is a 2007 Spanish found footage horror film that centers on a reporter and her cameraman who are covering a firefighter intervention in an apartment building in Barcelona. As the situation escalates after some of the building's occupants show animalistic and behavior, the reporter and cameraman find themselves confined inside the perilous building. Rec ramps up slowly but incredibly effectively, with you not realizing how tense you are until it is way too late. The film is essentially another zombie movie. However, Rec feels more like an infection horror than the shuffling horde we see in movies like 28 Days Later. The movie is incredibly claustrophobic, with the residents trapped inside an apartment block with no way out and no one to trust, because as time passes, in real time, more and more residents are becoming infected by the unknown virus, and there's nowhere to go but up the stairs and into the apartment penthouse where something even more terrifying and grotesque is lurking in the shadows. Prepare to be hiding behind a friend by the time you reach the night vision-hued third act. Trust me. As it stands, the movie holds an approval rating of 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the general consensus reading, "Plunging viewers into the nightmarish hellscape of an apartment complex under siege, Rec proves that found footage can still be used as an effective delivery mechanism for sparse economic horror." Rec was such a success that it sparked numerous sequels: Rec 2, Rec 3 Genesis, and Rec 4 Apocalypse. However, none reached the heights the original did. In at 3, The Witch 2015. The Witch is a 2015 supernatural period horror film written and directed by Robert Eggers in his feature directorial debut. The Witch follows a Puritan family who were ejected from their colony and forced to live deep in the dark woods all alone on a farm. They then begin to encounter forces of evil in the woods beyond their New England home. We follow Thomason, the eldest daughter played by Anya Taylor-Joy, as we witness the unraveling of this dysfunctional family who is faced by outside forces from within the trees. It's a love it or hate it kind of movie, with The Witch being an incredibly slow burn. However, before you know it, the horror hits, and absolutely everything about this movie is terrifying. From the shrill screams of the young twins to the monstrous goat known as Black Phillip. The Witch is a truly unique horror and a modern day masterpiece. On our favourite website, Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 90%, with the general consensus reading, "As thought-provoking as it is visually compelling, The Witch delivers a deeply unsettling exercise in slow-building horror that suggests great things for debuting writer-director Robert Eggers." Justin Chang went on to state, I quote, "A fiercely committed ensemble and an exquisite sense of historical detail conspire to cast a highly atmospheric spell in The Witch, a strikingly achieved tale of a mid-17th century New England family's steady descent into religious hysteria and madness." In at 2, Hereditary 2018. Hereditary is a 2018 supernatural horror film written and directed by Ari Aster in his feature film directorial debut. It stars Toni Collette, Alex Wolff, Millie Shapiro, and Gabrielle Byrne as a family haunted by a mysterious presence after the death of their secretive grandmother. At no point during the entire runtime of Hereditary do you feel like you can take a breath. It's adrenaline pumping but also absolutely terrifying to the point that you can't look away. From Toni Collette's miniature dioramas to a car ride that leaves you quite literally red in the face, no part of the movie feels safe in the slightest. You can't quite put your finger on why that is. Writing for Rolling Stone, Peter Travers called it the scariest movie of 2018, stating, "It's Colette, giving the performance of her career, who takes us inside Annie's breakdown in flesh and spirit and shatters what's left of our nerves. Her tour de force bristles with provocations that for sure will keep you up at night. But first, you'll scream your bloody head off." A.A. Dowd gave the film an A, stating that in its seriousness and hair-raising craftsmanship, Hereditary belongs to a proud genre lineage, a legacy that stretches back to the towering touchstones of American horror, unholy prestige zeitgeist classics like The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby. Remarkably, it's the first feature, the auspicious debut of writer-director Ari Aster, whose acclaimed disturbing short films were all leading like a tunnel into the underworld to this bleak vision. And finally coming in at number 1, The Exorcist, 1973. The Exorcist is a 1973 supernatural horror film directed by William Friedkin and produced and written for the screen by William Peter Blatty based on the 1971 novel of the same name by Blatty. The film centers on an actress who notices dangerous changes in the behavior and physical makeup of her 12-year-old daughter. Meanwhile, a young priest begins to doubt his faith while dealing with his mother's sickness. Now, it may be given that The Exorcist is on our list almost predictable, but after 40 years it still remains one of the most terrifying horror movies of all time. We follow Reagan, the daughter of an actress who one day dabbles with a Ouija board in her basement, unknowingly releasing the demon Pazuzu into her body. The Exorcist is unnerving from start to finish, and at no point do you ever feel safe as an audience member. The Exorcist is a tough watch even for veteran horror lovers, and still remains one of the scariest movies of all time. Stanley Kaufman in the New York Republic wrote, "This is the scariest film I've seen in years, the only scary film I've seen in years." Variety noted that it was an expert telling of supernatural horror story. The cinematic sequences assault the senses and the intellect with pure cinematic terror. Top 5 scary horror books better than the movie. Eternal Communism 1974 said, "Lucy McPhee, I like your t-shirt fashion, reminds me of my ex-girlfriend I had last November. Sounds like that girlfriend's dead. Sucks." Pulmatic42 said, "Anything Lovecraft, it's unadaptable to film." I completely agree, don't touch it, don't even look at it, ever. Thinker there said, "Would anyone be brave enough to read Queen Lucy's biography?" I mean, don't read it because I'm not even releasing it. I am writing one, so keep your eyes peeled. Fred Jones said, "You missed The Omen, The Entity, Christine, The Dead Zone and Sphere. This list definitely deserves a part 2. I mean, if you want to do my job for me, just come here and do it. Write your own list." Sorry. Nice selection, I will add them to a part 2 if we do a part 2. No guarantees, I don't make promises. Top 5 scary SCPs based on real things. Quadarius Owen said, "Lucy likes stars. I wonder what her zodiac sign is. My zodiac sign is Capricorn, the superior sign. Get with the times." Bitch said, "I love how straightforward she is. LMFAO. It's the only way I can be. Blunt. I can't lie. You see on my face." Scully Cat said, "Yes, the pom-pom is back, and oh Lucy, you were doing a great job too." Thank you. But we know the hat is the star of the show. I'll bring it back more often. Lauren Boulding said, "Queen Lucy's hat is back. Must know where that cursed item came from." It came from H&M, so maybe you can find it. Talia Chu said, "Hey Lucy, just being curious here, but which football team do you support?" I support the best football team, Arsenal, the one and only. Aurelia Ramsey said, "Wow Lucy, your recitation of the Lovecraft passages was Shakespearean." Well, thank you, I'm good at reading. My parents taught me well. Chris R said, "Lucy, any relation to Nanny McPhee?" Ha ha ha. I do have a nana, and she was called Nanny McPhee. So yeah, close enough. Klaatu said, "Lucy, please get a deal with any company that allows you to do audiobooks. I want to be able to just sit around listening to you talk to me." I don't know, maybe one day. I get bored reading and talking a lot, so I mean I love to read, but I don't know if I could read to people all day long. Maybe I'll think about it. Depends on the money, you know.